Good morning or good afternoon. It is afternoon, isn't it? It's 1 p.m. here at in the Roaring Fork Valley. My name is Mike Monroney. Welcome to ThunderStream. I can't really say tune in to ThunderStream, can I? You're not tuning in. You're, I guess, logging in. We got to learn to change our nomenclature to suit the new technology. Thank you so much for giving up part of your Sunday afternoon to watch us here. Today's event is a collaboration between the Pitkin County Library, the Friends of the Library, and Thunder River Theater Company. And we are using the ThunderStream platform, as you must be aware, to stream today's event. My name is Mike Monroney. I'm the president of the board at Thunder River Theater Company. And we've been so pleased at the response to the events that we've streamed, from happy hours to puppeteering classes and improv, all the way to our gala last week. Which, by the way, everything that we streamed so far is still available except for the gala. But if you missed the gala, which was a fundraiser, by the way, and you would like to see it, we will be happy to send you a link to watch the ThunderStream gala. And if by any chance you feel compelled, whether you stream the gala or not, to donate, there is a donate button on the website, the thunderrivertheater.com website. Some of you probably logged in through that website. Some of you may have logged in through the Facebook page. So today, Literature Out Loud is a project that the Pitkin County Library has been doing for years now. Sunday afternoons, one Sunday afternoon a month in the community room at the library, keeping alive the tradition of literature being read out loud. And the founder of that, by the way, is a woman named Janice Esty, who's reading today. We'll bring her on in just a moment. But I just wanted to point out that if you enjoy today, please let us know. And our next live streamed event will be a happy hour with consensual improv next Friday evening. And once again, you can log into that either from the Facebook page or directly from our website. So please do that. So I'm going to introduce my friend Janice Esty. Janice and I go back a long time. We were trying to figure that out. It's not quite 4 decades, but it's close. We have worked several of the same places and crossed paths, but we never actually worked together until we worked together at the Crystal Palace. And things you need to know about Janice is that she is a playwright. She's a songwriter, and she is the winner. This is kind of a big deal. The winner of the Bulwer Lytton Literary Prize. This is an international prize given to the person who can come up with the worst starting line of a novel. And it's named after the man who wrote the famous "It Was a Dark and Stormy Night," which is generally regarded as the worst starting line of a novel. So with my great pleasure, I would like to introduce Janice Esty.
Gosh, I'm humbled by all that praise, Mike.
Well, we're humbled by you. I've sung songs you've written. I've been in a play that you wrote and co-directed, and our association goes way back. So I'm really happy to continue to be a part of the Literature Out Loud. It's really fun for me.
Thank you. Well, I don't have anybody on Literature Out Loud that isn't a good reader, so there you are. No, Literature Out Loud has been really great, and the Pitkin County Library has been so good to have it continue for almost 10 years now. Mm-hmm. Even though I now live in Boulder, I had been commuting up there to see it, and this makes it a little easier, the way to do it this way. But
so you're saying that the quarantine is saving you time?
It is, and mileage, I gotta say. But I miss the mountains, and I miss the Roaring Fork Valley very much. Yeah. So it's been very nice to be able to get up there. But thanks to Thunder River Theater, we can still do our program, even though the library is not open for everything. And so here we are. It's very nice. Let's see. What else do you need to know about this?
Well, yeah, I'll let you go ahead.
I know. When we're at the library, we have the ability to have some cookies, have something to drink, kind of get settled in, because it's about an hour worth of programming. Mm-hmm. And I'd encourage you, if you at home, to get what you need. There are going to be 3 different stories read today by the wonderful author, Kurt Vonnegut. They're light, they're sweet, they're funny, but You want to kind of be settled a little bit in order to enjoy the program more. Anything else you have to say, Mikey, before we get
I don't think
started?
so. I'll let Sean disappear me, and you can read our first story, and I'll come back for the second one. How's that?
Wonderful.
All right.
Good
See you
thinking.
shortly.
This first story is called Next Door by Kurt Vonnegut. I hope you enjoy it. The old house was divided into two dwellings by a thin wall that passed on with high fidelity sounds on either side. On the north side were the Leonards. On the south side were the Hargers. The Leonards, husband, wife, and 8-year-old son, had just moved in. And, aware of the wall, they kept their voices down as they argued in a friendly way as to whether or not the boy, Paul, was old enough to be left alone for the evening. "Shh," said Paul's father. "Was I shouting?" said his mother. "I was talking in a perfectly normal tone." "If I can hear Harger pulling a cork, he can certainly hear you," said his father. "I didn't say anything I'd be ashamed to have anybody hear," said Mrs. Leonard. "You called Paul a baby," said Mr. Leonard. "That certainly embarrasses Paul, and it embarrasses me." "It's just a way of talking," she said. "It's a way we've got to stop," he said, "and we can stop treating him like a baby, too. Tonight, we simply shake his hand, walk out, and go to the movie." He turned to Paul. "You're not afraid, are you, boy?" "I'll be all right," said Paul. He was very tall for his age and thin and had a soft, sleepy, radiant sweetness engendered by his mother. "I'm fine." "Damn right," said his father, clouting him on the back. "It'll be an adventure." "I'd feel better about this adventure if we could get a sitter," said his mother. "If it's going to spoil the picture for you," said his father, "let's take him with us." Mrs. Leonard was shocked. "Oh, it isn't for children." "I don't care," said Paul amiably. "That's why they're not wanting him to see certain movies, certain magazines, certain books, certain television shows. It was all a mystery he respected, even relished a little." "It wouldn't kill him to see it," said his father. "You know what it's about," she said. "What is it about?" said Paul innocently. Mrs. Leonard looked to her husband for help and got none. "It's about a girl who chooses her friends unwisely," she said. "Oh," said Paul, "that doesn't sound very interesting." "Are we going or aren't we?" said Mr. Leonard impatiently. "The show starts in 10 minutes. Mrs. Leonard bit her lip. "All right," she said bravely. "You lock the windows and the back door, and I'll write down the telephone numbers for the police and the fire department and the theater and Dr. Faley." She turned to Paul. "You can dial, can't you, dear?" "He's been dialing for years," cried Mr. Leonard. "Shh," said Mrs. Leonard. "Sorry." Mr. Leonard bowed to the wall. "My apologies." "Paul, dear," said Mrs. Leonard, "what are you going to do while we're gone?" "I'll look through my microscope, I guess," said Paul. "You're not going to be looking at germs, are you?" she said. "Nope, just hair, sugar, pepper, stuff like that," said Paul. His mother frowned judiciously. "I think that would be all right, don't you?" she said to Mr. Leonard. "Fine," said Mr. Leonard, "just as long as the pepper doesn't make him sneeze." "I'll be careful," said Paul. Mr. Leonard winced. "Shh," he said. Soon after Paul's parents left, the radio in the Harger apartment went on. It went on softly at first, so softly that Paul, looking through his microscope on the living room coffee table, couldn't make out the announcer's words. The music was frail and dissonant, undefinable. Gamely, Paul tried to listen to the music rather than to the man and woman who were fighting. Paul squinted through the eyepiece of his microscope at a bit of hair far below, and he turned a knob to bring the hair into focus. It looked like a glittering brown eel, flecked here and there with tiny spectra where the light struck the hair just so. There. The voices of the man and woman were getting louder again, drowning out the radio. Paul twisted the microscope knob nervously, and the objective lens ground into the glass slide on which the hair rested. The woman was shouting now. Paul unscrewed the lens and examined it for damage. Now the man shouted back, shouted something awful, unbelievable. Paul got a sheet of lens tissue from his bedroom and dusted at the frosted dot on the lens where the lens had bitten into the slide. He screwed the lens back in place. All was quiet again next door, except for the radio. Paul looked down into the microscope, down into the milky mist of the damaged lens. Now the fight was beginning again, louder and louder, cruel and crazy, trembling. Paul sprinkled grains of salt on a fresh slide and put it under the microscope. The woman shouted again, a high, ragged, poisonous shout. Paul turned the knob too hard, and the fresh slide cracked and fell in triangles to the floor. Paul stood, shaking, wanting to shout too, to shout in terror and bewilderment. It had to stop, whatever it was. It had to stop. "If you're going to yell, turn up the radio," the man cried. Paul heard the clicking of the woman's heels across the floor. The radio volume swelled until the boom of the bass made Paul feel like he was trapped in a drum. "And now," bellowed the radio, "for Katie from Fred, for Nancy from Bob, who thinks she's swell, for Arthur, who's worshipped him from afar for weeks. Here's the old Glenn Miller Band and that all-time favorite, Stardust. Remember, if you have a dedication, call Milton 93000. Ask for All Night Sam, the record man." The music picked up the house and shook it. A door slammed next door. Now someone hammered on a door. Paul looked down into his microscope once more, looked at nothing. While the prickling sensation spread over his skin, he faced the truth. The man and woman would kill each other if he didn't stop them. He beat on the wall with his fist. "Mr. Harger, stop it!" he cried. "Mrs. Harger, stop it!" "For Ollie from Lavinia," All Night Sam cried back at him. "For Ruth from Carl, who'll never forget last Tuesday. For Wilbur from Mary, who's lonesome tonight. Here's the Souter Finnegan Band asking, 'Love, what are you doing to my heart?'" Next door, crockery smashed, filling a split second of radio silence, and then the tidal wave of music drowned everything again. Paul stood by the wall, trembling in his helplessness. "Mr. Harger, Mrs. Harger, please!" "Remember the number," said All Night Sam. "Milton 93000. Dazed, Paul went to the phone and dialed the number. "WJCD," said the switchboard operator. "Would you kindly connect me with All Night Sam?" said Paul. "Oh," said All Night Sam. He was eating, talking with a full mouth. In the background, Paul could hear sweet, bleating music, the original of what was rending the radio next door. "I wonder if I might make a dedication," said Paul. "Dunno why not," said Sam. "Ever belong to any organization listed as subversive by the Attorney General's office?" Paul thought a moment. "No, sir, I don't think so, sir." "Shoot," said Sam. "From Mr. Lemuel K. Harger to Mrs. Harger," said Paul. "What's the message?" said Sam. "I love you," said Paul. "Let's make up and start all over again." The woman's voice was so shrill with passion that it cut through the din of the radio, and even Sam heard it. "Kid, are you in trouble?" said Sam. "Your folks fighting?" Paul was afraid that Sam would hang up on him if he found out that Paul wasn't a blood relative of the Hargers. "Yes, sir," he said. "And you're trying to pull them back together again with this dedication?" said Sam. "Yes, sir," said Paul. Sam became very emotional. "Okay, kid," he said hoarsely. "I'll give it everything I've got. Maybe it'll work. I once saved a guy from shooting himself the same way." "How did you do that?" said Paul, fascinated. "He called up and said he was going to blow his brains out," said Sam. "And I played the Bluebird of Happiness." He hung up. Paul dropped the telephone onto its cradle. The music stopped, and Paul's hair stood on end. For the first time, the fantastic speed of modern communications was real to him, and he was appalled. "Folks," said Sam, "I guess everybody stops and wonders sometimes what the heck he thinks he's doing with the life the good Lord gave him. It may seem funny to you folks because I always keep up a cheerful front no matter how I feel inside, that I wonder sometimes too, and then, just like some angel was trying to tell me, 'Keep going, Sam, keep going,' something like this comes along." "Folks," said Sam, "I've been asked to bring a man and his wife back together again through the miracle of radio. I guess there's no sense in kidding ourselves about marriage. It isn't any bowl of cherries. There's ups and downs, and sometimes folks don't see how they can go on." Paul was impressed with the wisdom and authority of Sam. Having the radio turned up high made sense now, for Sam was speaking like the right-hand man of God. When Sam paused for effect, all was still next door. Already, the miracle was working. "Now," said Sam, "a guy in my business has to be half musician, half philosopher, half psychiatrist, and half electrical engineer. And if I've learned one thing from working with all you wonderful people out there, it's this. If folks would swallow their pride and self-respect, there wouldn't be any more divorces." There were affectionate cooings from next door. A lump grew in Paul's throat as he thought about the beautiful thing he and Sam were bringing to pass. "Folks," said Sam, "that's all I'm going to say about love and marriage. That's all anybody needs to know. And now, for Mrs. Lemuel K. Harger from Mr. Harger, I love you. Let's make up and start all over again." Sam choked up. "Here's Eartha Kitt, and somebody bad stole the wedding bell." The radio next door went off. The world lay still. A purple emotion flooded Paul's being. Childhood dropped away, and he hung, dizzy, on the brink of life, rich, violent, rewarding. There was movement next door, slow, foot-dragging movement. "So," said the woman. "Charlotte," said the man uneasily, "honey, I swear, I love you," she said bitterly. "Let's make up and start all over again." "Baby," said the man desperately, "it's another Lemuel K. Harger. It's got to be." "You want your wife back?" she said. "All right, I won't get in her way. She can have you, Lemuel, you jewel beyond price, you." "She must have called the station," said the man. "She can have you, you philandering, two-timing, two-bit Lochinvar," she said. "Bet you won't be in very good condition." "Charlotte, put down that gun," said the man. "Don't do anything you'll be sorry for." "That's all behind me, you worm," she said. There were 3 shots. Paul ran out into the hall and bumped into the woman as she burst from the Harger apartment. She was a big, blonde woman, all soft and awry like an unmade bed. She and Paul screamed at the same time, and then she grabbed him as he started to run. "You want candy?" she said wildly. "Bicycle?" "No, thank you," said Paul shrilly. "Not at this time." "You haven't seen or heard a thing," she said. "You know what happens to squealers?" "Yes," cried Paul. She dug into her purse and brought out a perfumed mulch of face tissues, bobby pins, and cash. "Here," she panted. "It's yours. And there's more where that came from if you keep your mouth shut." And she stuffed it into his trousers pocket. She looked at him fiercely, then fled into the street. Paul ran back into his apartment, jumped into bed, and pulled the covers up over his head. In the hot, dark cave of the bed, he cried because he and all night Sam had helped to kill a man. A policeman came clumping into the house very soon and knocked on both apartment doors with his billy club. Numb, Paul crept out of the hot, dark cave and answered the door. Just as he did, the door across the hall opened, and there stood Mr. Harger, haggard but whole. "Yes, sir," said Harger. He was a small, balding man with a hairline mustache. "Can I help you?" "The neighbors heard some shots," said the policeman. "Really?" said Harger urbanely. He dampened his mustache with the tip of his little finger. "How bizarre. I heard nothing." He looked at Paul sharply. "Young man, have you been playing with your father's guns again?" "Oh, no, sir," said Paul, horrified. "Where are your folks?" said the policeman to Paul. "At the movies," said Paul. "You're all alone?" said the policeman. "Yes, sir," said Paul. "It's an adventure." "I'm sorry I said that about the guns," said Harger. "I certainly would have heard any shots in the house. The walls are thin as paper, and I heard nothing." Paul looked at him gratefully. "And you didn't hear any shots either, kid," said the policeman. Before Paul could find an answer, there was a disturbance out on the street. A big, motherly woman was getting out of a taxicab and wailing at the top of her lungs, "Lem, Lem, baby!" She barged into the foyer, a suitcase bumping against her leg and tearing her stocking to shreds. She dropped the suitcase and ran to Harger, throwing her arms around him. "I got your message, darling," she said, "and I did just what all night Sam told me to do. I swallowed my self-respect, and here I am." "Rose, Rose, Rose, my little Rose," said Harger, "don't ever leave me again." They grappled with each other affectionately and staggered into their apartment. "Just look at this apartment," said Mrs. Harger. "Men are just lost without women." As she closed the door, Paul could see that she was awfully pleased with the mess. "You sure you didn't hear any shots?" said the policeman to Paul. The ball of money in Paul's pocket seemed to swell to the size of a watermelon. "Yes, sir," he croaked. The policeman left. Paul shut his apartment door, shuffled into his bedroom, and collapsed on the bed. The next voices Paul heard came from his own side of the wall. The voices were sunny, the voices of his mother and father. His mother was singing a nursery rhyme, and his father was undressing him. "Diddle, diddle, dumpling, my son John," piped his mother, "went to bed with his stockings on, one shoe off and one shoe on. Diddle, diddle, dumpling, my son John." Paul opened his eyes. "Hi, big boy," said his father. "You went to sleep with all your clothes on." "How's my little adventurer?" said his mother. "Okay," said Paul sleepily. "How was the show?" "It wasn't for children, honey," said his mother. "You would have liked the short subject, though. It was all about bears, cunning little cubs." Paul's father handed her Paul's trousers, and she shook them out and hung them neatly on the back of a chair by the bed. She patted them smooth and felt the ball of money in the pocket. "Little boy's pockets," she said, delighted. Full of childhood's mysteries, an enchanted frog, a magic pocket knife from a fairy princess. She caressed the lump. "He's not a little boy, he's a big boy," said Paul's father, "and he's too old to be thinking about fairy princesses." Paul's mother held up her hands. "Don't rush it, don't rush it. When I saw him asleep there, I realized all over again how dreadfully short childhood is." She reached into the pocket and she sighed wistfully. "Little boys are so hard on clothes, especially pockets." She brought out the ball and held it under Paul's nose. "Now, would you mind telling Mommy what we have here?" she said gaily. The ball bloomed like a frowsy chrysanthemum with 1s, 5s, 10s, 20s, and lipstick-stained Kleenex for petals. And rising from it, befuddling Paul's young mind, was the pungent musk of perfume. Paul's father sniffed the air. What is that smell? He said. Paul's mother rolled her eyes. Taboo, she said.
I loved the description, Harger, haggard, and whole.
Yes, it's nice, huh?
Vonnegut can be alliterative. That was really fun, Janice.
Thank you very much.
You're
And
welcome.
I love what you're about to read.
This is a wonderful story. Yes, thank you for letting me read it. And this story is called Who Am I This Time? Vonnegut wrote it in 1961. And just as a matter of interest, 20 years later, a director named Jonathan Demme dramatized this story, and it starred Christopher Walken and Susan Sarandon. So it's available on YouTube. Just search Who Am I This Time on YouTube, and it'll come up if you're interested after you see it. Who Am I This Time? Kurt Vonnegut. The North Crawford Mask and Wig Club, an amateur theater society that I belong to, voted to do Tennessee Williams' A Streetcar Named Desire for the spring play. Dora Sawyer, who always directs, said she couldn't direct this time because her mother was so sick. And she said the club ought to develop some other directors anyway because she couldn't live forever, although she made it safely to 74. So I got stuck with the directing job, even though the only thing I'd ever directed before was the installation of combination aluminum store windows and screens that I'd sold. And that's what I am, a salesman of storm windows and doors, and here and there a bathtub enclosure. As far as acting goes, the highest rank I'd ever held on stage was either butler or policeman, whichever's higher. I made a lot of conditions before I took that directing job, and the biggest one was that Harry Nash, the only real actor the club has, had to take the Marlon Brando role in the play. To give you an idea of how versatile Harry is, inside of 1 year, he was Captain Queeg in the Caine Mutiny Court-Martial, then Abe Lincoln in Illinois, and then the young architect in The Moon is Blue. The year after that, Harry Nash was Henry VIII in Anne of 1,000 Days and Doc in Come Back, Little Sheba. And I was after him to play Marlon Brando in Streetcar Named Desire. Now, Harry wasn't at the meeting to say whether he'd take the part or not. He never came to meetings. He was too shy. He didn't stay away from meetings because he had something else to do. He wasn't married, didn't go out with women, didn't have any close men friends either. He stayed away from all kinds of gatherings because he never could think of anything to say without a script. So I had to go down to Miller's hardware store, where Harry was a clerk, the next day and ask him if he'd take the part. I stopped off at the telephone company to complain about a bill I'd got for a call to Honolulu. I'd never called Honolulu in my life. But there was this beautiful girl I'd never seen before behind the counter at the phone company. And she explained that the company had put in an automatic billing machine and that the machine didn't have all the bugs out of it yet, and it made mistakes. Not only did I not call Honolulu, I said to her, I don't think anybody in North Crawford ever has or will. So she took the charge off the bill. And I asked her if she was from around North Crawford. She said no. She said she just came with the new billing machine to town to teach local girls how to take care of it. After that, she said she would go with some other machine to some other place. Well, I said, as long as people have come along with the machines, I guess we're all right. What? She said. Well, when machines start delivering themselves, I said, I guess that's when people really ought to start worrying. Oh, she said. She didn't seem very interested in that subject, and I wondered if she was interested in anything. She seemed kind of numb, almost like a machine herself, an automatic phone company politeness machine. How long will you be in town? I asked her. I stay in each town 8 weeks, sir, she said. She had pretty blue eyes, but there wasn't much hope or curiosity in them. She told me she'd been going from town to town like that for 2 years, always a stranger. And I got it in my head that she might make a good Stella for the play. Stella was the wife of the Marlon Brando character, the wife of the character I wanted Harry Nash to play. So I told her where and when we were going to hold tryouts and said the club would be very happy if she'd come to auditions. She looked a little surprised and warmed up a little bit. You know, that's the first time anybody ever asked me to participate in any community thing. Well, I said, there isn't any other way to get to know a lot of nice people faster than to be in a play with them. She said her name was Helene Shaw. She said she might just surprise me and herself. She just might come. You would think that North Crawford would be fed up with Harry Nash in plays after all the plays he'd been in, but the fact was that North Crawford probably would have gone on enjoying Harry forever, because he was never Harry on stage. When the maroon curtain went up on the stage in the gymnasium of the Consolidated Junior Senior High School, Harry, body and soul, was exactly what the script and the director told him to be. Somebody said one time that Harry ought to go to a psychiatrist so that he could be something important and colorful in real life too. So he could get married anyway and maybe get a better job than just clerking in Miller's hardware store for $50 a week. But I don't know what a psychiatrist could have turned up about him that the town didn't already know. The trouble with Harry is that he'd been left on the doorstep of the Unitarian Church when he was a baby, and he never did find out who his parents were. When I told him there in Miller's that I'd been appointed director and I wanted him to play in my play, he said that he said what he said to anybody about a play. And it was kind of sad if you think about it. Who am I this time? He said. So I held tryouts where they're always held, in the meeting room on the second floor of the North Crawford Public Library. Doris Sawyer, the woman who usually directs, came to give me the benefit of her experience. The two of us sat in state upstairs while the people who wanted parts waited below. We called them upstairs, one by one. Harry Nash came to the tryouts, even though it was a waste of time. I guess he wanted to get that little bit more acting in. For Harry's pleasure, and our pleasure too, we had him read from the scene where he beats up his wife. It was a play in itself, the way Harry did it. And Tennessee Williams hadn't written it all either. Tennessee Williams didn't write the part, for instance, where Harry, who weighs maybe 145 and who's about 5 feet 8 inches tall, added 50 pounds to his weight and 4 inches to his stature by just picking up the script. He had a short little double-breasted bellows back grade school graduation suit coat on and a dinky little red tie with a horse head on it. He took off the coat and tie, opened up his collar, then turned his back to Doris and me, getting up steam for the part. There was a big rip in the back of the shirt, and it looked like a fairly new shirt, too. He'd ripped it on purpose, just so he could be that much more like Marlon Brando right from the first. When he started, he faced us, and he was huge and handsome and conceited and cruel. Doris read the part of Stella, the wife, and Harry bullied that old lady into believing that she was a sweet, pregnant girl married to a sexy gorilla who was going to beat her brains out. She had me believing it too. And I read the line of Blanche, her sister in the play, and darned if Harry didn't scare me into feeling like a drunk and faded Southern belle. And then, while Doris and I were getting over our emotional experiences, like people coming out from under ether, Harry put down the playbook, put on his coat and tie, and turned into the pale hardware store clerk again. Was that all right? He said, and he seemed pretty sure he wouldn't get the part. Well, I said, for a first reading, that wasn't too bad. Is there a chance I'll get the part? He said. I don't know why he always pretended like there was some doubt about him getting a part, but he did. I think we can safely say we're leaning pretty powerfully in your direction. He was really pleased. Thanks a lot, he said, and he shook my hand. Is there a pretty girl downstairs? I asked, meaning Helene Shaw. I didn't notice, said Harry. It turned out that Helene Shaw had come for tryouts, and Doris and I had our hearts broken. We thought the North Crawford Mask and Wig Club was finally going to put on a really good-looking, really young girl on stage instead of just one of the beat-up, tired 40-year-old women we usually have to palm off as girls. But Helene Shaw couldn't act for sour apples. No matter what we gave her to read, she was the same girl with the same smile for anybody who had a complaint about his or her phone bill. Doris tried to coach her some to make her understand that Stella in the play was a very passionate girl who loved a gorilla because she needed a gorilla. But Helene just read the lines the same way again. I don't think a volcano could have stirred her up enough to say, ooh. Dear, said Doris, I'm going to ask you a personal question. All right, said Helene. Have you ever been in love? Said Doris. The reason I ask, she said, remembering some old love might help you put some more warmth in your acting. Helene frowned and thought hard. Well, she said, I travel a lot, you know, and practically all the men in the different companies I visit are married, and I never stay any place long enough to know many people who aren't. What about school? Said Doris. What about puppy love and all the other kinds of love in school? So Helene thought hard about that, and then she said, well, even in school, I was always moving around a lot. My father was a construction worker following jobs around, so I was always saying hello or goodbye to some place without anything in between. Said Doris. Would movie stars count? Said Helene. I don't mean in real life. I never knew any. I just mean up there on the screen. Doris looked at me and rolled her eyes. Well, I guess that's a love of a kind, she said. And then Helene got a little enthusiastic. I used to sit through those movies over and over again, she said, and pretend I was married to whoever the male movie star was. They were the only people who came with us. I mean, no matter where we moved, there they were, those movie stars. Uh-huh, said Doris. Well, thank you, Miss Shaw, I said. You go downstairs and wait with the rest. We'll let you know. So we tried to find another Stella, and there just wasn't one. Not another woman in the club with the dew still on her. All we've got are Blanches, I said, meaning all we had were faded women who could play the part of Blanche, Stella's fabled sister, faded sister. That's life, I guess, 20 Blanches to one Stella. And when you find a Stella, said Doris, it turns out that she doesn't know what love is. Doris and I decided that there was one last thing that we could try. We could get Harry Nash to play a scene along with Helene. He just might make her bubble the least little bit, I said. That girl hasn't got a bubble in her, said Doris. So we called down the stairs for Helene to come back on up, and we told somebody to go find Harry. Harry never sat with the rest of the people at tryouts or even at rehearsals either. The minute he didn't have a part to play, he'd disappear into some hiding place where he could hear people call him, but where he couldn't be seen. At tryouts at the library, he generally hid in the reference room, passing the time looking at flags of different countries in the front of the dictionary. Helene came back upstairs, and we were very sorry and surprised to see that she'd been crying. Oh, dear, said Doris. Oh, my, now, what on earth's the trouble, dear? I was terrible, wasn't I? Said Helene, hanging her head. Doris said the only thing anybody can say in an amateur theatrical society when somebody cries. She said, oh, I know, dear, you were marvelous. No, I wasn't, said Helene. I'm a walking icebox, and I know it. Nobody could look at you and say that, said Doris. Well, when they get to know me, they can say it, said Helene. When people get to know me, that's what they do say. Her tears got worse. I don't want to be the way I am, she said. I just can't help it living the way I've lived all my life. The only experiences I've had have been in crazy dreams of movie stars. When I meet somebody nice in real life, I feel as though I were in some kind of big bottle, as though I couldn't touch that person no matter how hard I tried. And Helene pushed on the air as though she were in a big bottle, and it was all around her. You asked me if I'd ever been in love, she said to Doris. No, but I want to be. I know what this play's about. I know what Stella's supposed to feel and why she feels it. And her tears just wouldn't let her go on. You what, dear? Said Doris gently. And Helene, as she pushed at the imaginary bottle again, I just don't know how to begin. There was a heavy clumping on the library steps. It sounded like a deep-sea diver coming upstairs in his lead shoes. It was Harry Nash, turning himself into Marlon Brando. In he came, practically dragging his knuckles on the floor. He was so much in character that the sight of a weeping woman made him sneer. Harry, I said, I'd like you to meet Helene Shaw. Helene, this is Harry Nash. If you get the part of Stella, he'll be your husband in the play. Harry didn't offer to shake hands. He put his hands in his pockets and he hunched over and he looked her up and down, gave her looks that left her naked. Her tears stopped right then and there. I wonder if you two would play the fight scene, I said, and then the reunion scene right after it. Sure, said Harry, his eyes still on her. Those eyes burned up close faster than she could put them on. Sure, he said, if Stell's game. What? Said Helene. She'd turned the color of cranberry juice. Stella, that's you. Stell's my wife. I handed the two of them the scripts. Harry snatched his from me without a word of thanks. Helene's hands weren't working very well, and I had to kind of mold them around the script. I want something I can throw, said Harry. What? I said. There's one place where I throw a radio out the window. What can I throw? So I said that iron paperweight could be the radio, and I opened the window wide. Helene Shaw looked scared to death. Where do you want us to start? Said Harry, and he rolled his shoulders like a prize fighter warming up. Start a few lines back from where you throw the radio out the window, I said. Okay, got it. He scanned the stage directions. Let's see, he said. After I throw the radio, she runs off stage, I chase her, and I sock her one. Right. Okay, baby, Harry said to Helene, his eyelids drooping. What was about to happen was wilder than the chariot race in Ben-Hur. On your mark, said Harry. Get ready, baby. Go! When the scene was over, Helene Shaw was as hot as a hod carrier and limp as an eel. She sat down with her mouth open and her head hanging to one side. She wasn't in any bottle anymore. There wasn't any bottle to hold her up and keep her safe and clean. That bottle was gone. Do I get the part or don't I? Harry said to me. You'll do. You said a mouthful. I'm going now. See you around, Stell. So he slammed the door behind him, and I had to go to Helene. Helene, I said, Miss Shaw. Huh? The part of Stella is yours, I said. You were great. I was, she said. I had no idea you had that much fire in you, dear, said Doris. Fire? Said Helene. She didn't know if she was afoot or on horseback. Skyrockets, pinwheels, Roman candles, exclaimed Doris. Said Helene. She didn't know what was going on or what was happening to her. She looked as though she were going to sit in the chair with her mouth open forever. Stella, I said, you have my permission to go. So we started having rehearsals 4 nights a week on the stage of the Consolidated School. and Harry and Helene set such a pace that everybody in the production was half crazy with excitement and exhaustion before they'd even rehearsed 4 times. Usually a director has to beg people to learn their lines, but I had no such trouble. Harry and Helene were working so well together that everybody else in the cast regarded it as a duty and an honor and a pleasure to support them. I was certainly lucky, or at least thought I was. Things were going so well, so hot and heavy, and so early in the game that I had to say to Harry and Helene after one last scene, you guys, hold a little something back for the actual performance, would you please? You're going to burn yourselves out. I said that at the 4th or maybe 5th rehearsal, and Lydia Miller, who was playing Blanche, the fated sister, was sitting next to me in the audience. In real life, Lydia is the wife of Vern Miller. Vern Miller was Miller's hardware store. Vern was Harry's boss. Lydia, I said to her, have we got a play or have we got a play? Yes, you've got a play, all right. She made it sound as though I'd committed some kind of a crime, done something terrible. You should be very proud of yourself. What do you mean by that? I said. Before Lydia could answer, Harry yelled at me from the stage, asked if I was through with him, and asked if he could go home. I told him he could, and still Marlon Brando, he left, kicking furniture out of his way and slamming doors. Helene was left all alone on the stage, sitting on a couch with the same gaga look she'd had after the tryouts. The girl was drained. I turned to Lydia again and I said, well, until now, I thought I had every reason to be happy and proud. Is there something going on I don't know about? Do you know that girl's in love with Harry? Lydia said. In the play? I said. What play? Said Lydia. There isn't any play going on now. Just look at her up there. She gave a sad cackle. You aren't directing this play. Who is? I said. Mother Nature at her worst. And think what it's going to do to that girl when she discovers who Harry really is. She corrected herself and said, what Harry really isn't. I didn't do anything about it because I didn't figure it was any of my business. I heard Lydia try to do something about it, and she didn't get very far. You know, Lydia said to Helene one night, I once played Anne Rutledge, and Harry was Abraham Lincoln. Helene clapped her hands. That must have been heaven, she said. Oh, it was in a way. Sometimes I'd get so worked up I'd love Harry the way I'd love Abraham Lincoln. I'd have to come back to earth and remind myself that he wasn't ever going to free the slaves, that he was just a clerk in my husband's hardware store. He's the most marvelous man I've ever met, said Helene. Of course, one thing you have to get set for when you're in a play with Harry, said Lydia, is what happens after the last performance. What are you talking about? Said Lydia. Well, once the show's over, said Lydia, wherever you thought or whatever you thought Harry was just evaporates into thin air. Well, I don't believe it, said Helene. I admit it's hard to believe, said Lydia. Then Helene got a little sore. Anyway, why tell me about it? Even if it's true, what do I care? I don't know, Lydia said, backing away. I just thought you might find it interesting. Well, I don't, said Helene. And Lydia slunk away, feeling about as frowsy and unloved as her character was supposed to feel in the play. After that, nobody said anything more to Helene to warn her about Harry, not even when word got around that she told the telephone company that she didn't want to be moved around anymore, that she wanted to stay in North Crawford. So the time finally came to put on the play. We ran it for 3 nights, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and we murdered those audiences. They believed every word what was said on stage, and when the maroon curtain came down and they were ready to go to the nut house along with Blanche, the fated sister. On Thursday night, the other girls at the telephone company sent Helene a dozen red roses. When Helene and Harry were taking a curtain call together, I passed the roses over the footlights to her. She came forward for them, took one rose from the bouquet to give to Harry. But when she turned to give Harry the rose in front of everybody, Harry was gone. The curtain came down on that extra little scene, that girl offering a rose to nothing and nobody. I went backstage. I found her still holding that one rose. She'd put the rest of the bouquet aside. There were tears in her eyes. "What did I do wrong?" she said to me. "Did I insult him in some way?" "No, he always does that after a performance. The minute it's over, he clears out as fast as he can." "And tomorrow he'll disappear again?" "Without even taking off his makeup." "And Saturday?" "He'll stay for the cast party on Saturday, won't he?" "Harry never goes to parties," I said. "When the curtain comes down on Saturday, that's the last anybody will see of him till he goes to work on Monday." "How sad," she said. Helene's performance on Friday night wasn't nearly so good as Thursday's. She seemed to be thinking about other things. She watched Harry take off after curtain call. She didn't say a word. But on Saturday, she put on the best performance yet. Ordinarily, it was Harry who set the pace, but on Saturday, Harry had to work to keep up with Helene. When the curtain came down on the final curtain call, Harry wanted to get away, but he couldn't. Helene wouldn't let go of his hand. The rest of the cast and stage crew and a lot of well-wishers from the audience were all standing around Harry and Helene, and Harry was trying to get his hand back. "Oh, well," he said, "I've got to go." "Where?" she said. "Oh, home." "Won't you please take me to the cast party?" she said. He got very red. I'm afraid I'm not much on parties." After all, the Marlon Brando in him was totally gone. He was tongue-tied, he was scared, he was shy. He was everything Harry was famous for between plays. "All right," she said. "I'll let you go if you promise me one thing." "What's that?" he said, and I thought he would jump out a window if she'd let go of him then. "I want you to promise to stay here until I get you your present." "Present?" he said, getting even more panicky. "Promise?" she said. He promised. It was the only way he'd get his hand back, and he stood there miserably while Helene went down to the ladies' dressing room for the present. While he waited, a lot of people congratulated him on being such a fine actor, but congratulations never made him happy. He just wanted to get away. Helene came back with the present. It turned out to be a little blue book with a big red ribbon for a place marker. It was a copy of Romeo and Juliet. Harry was very embarrassed. It was all he could do to say, "Thank you." "The marker marks my favorite scene," said Helene. "Ah," said Harry. "Don't you want to see what my favorite scene is?" said Helene. So Harry had to open the book to the red ribbon. Helene got close to him and read a line of Juliet's. "How camest thou hither? Tell me, and wherefore?" she read. "The orchard walls are high and hard to climb, and the place death, considering who thou art. If any of my kinsmen find you here," she pointed to the next line. "Now, look what Romeo says." "Ah," said Harry. "Read what Romeo says," said Helene. Harry cleared his throat. He didn't want to read the line, but he had to. "With love's light wings did I o'erperch these walls," he said out loud in his everyday voice. But then a change came over him. "With love's light wings did I o'erperch these walls, for stony limits cannot hold love out," he read and straightened up, and 8 years dropped from him, and he was brave and gay. "And what love can do that dares love attempt," he said. "Therefore thy kinsmen are no hedge to me." "If they see thee, they will murder thee," said Helene, and she started walking him towards the wings. "Alack," said Harry, "there lies more peril in thine eyes than 20 of their swords." Helene led him toward the backstage exit. "Look thou but sweet," said Harry, "and I am proof against their enmity." "I would not for the world that they saw thee here," said Helene. And that was the last we heard. The two of them were out the door and gone. They never did show up at the cast party. The two of them showed up 1 week later, getting married. They were married. They seemed happy, although they're kind of strange from time to time, depending on which play they're reading to each other at the time. I dropped into the phone company office the other day on account of the billing machine was making dumb mistakes again. I asked Colleen what play she and Harry'd been reading lately. In the past week, she said, I've been married to Othello, been loved by Faust, and been kidnapped by Paris. Wouldn't you say I was the luckiest girl in town? I said, yes, I thought so. And I told her most of the women in town thought so too. They had their chance, she said. Most of them probably couldn't stand the excitement, I said. And I told her I'd been asked to direct another play. I asked if she and Harry would be available for the cast. She gave me a big smile and said, who are we this time?
Perfect. You can't beat it, can it?
Such a good story.
It's a beautiful story. Thank
And
you.
appropriate, I think, for a theater ThunderStream, don't you?
I do indeed. But can we end with one more?
Let's do one more, please. I'll bow out and cede the screen to you.
All right. This is Adam, a very sweet story by Kurt Vonnegut. It was midnight in a Chicago lying-in hospital. Mr. Souza, said the nurse, your wife had a girl. You can see the baby in about 20 minutes. I know, said Mr. Souza, a sullen gorilla, plainly impatient with having tiresome and familiar routine explained to him. He snapped his fingers. Girl. 7 now, 7 girls I got now, a house full of women. I can beat the stuffings out of it. 10 men my own size, but what do I get? Girls. Mr. Netman, said the nurse to the other man in the room. She pronounced the name, as almost all Americans did, a colorless Netman. I'm sorry, still no word on your wife. She is keeping us waiting, isn't she? She grinned glassily and left. Sousa turned on Knechtman. Some little son of a gun like you, Netman. You want a boy? Bing. You got one. Want a football team? Bing, 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 11. You got it. He stomped out of the room. The man he left behind, all alone now, was Heinz Knechtmann, a presser in a dry cleaning plant, a small man with thin wrists and a bald head and a bad spine that kept him slightly hunched, as though forever weary. His face was long and big-nosed and thin-lipped, but was so overcast with good-humored humility as to be beautiful. His eyes were large and brown and deep-set and long-lashed. He was only 22, but seemed and felt much older. He had died a little, as each member of his family had been led away and killed by the Nazis, until only in him, at the age of 10, had life and the name of Knechtmann shared a soul. He and his wife, Avchen, had grown up behind barbed wire. He had been staring at the walls of the waiting room for 12 hours now since noon, when his wife's labor pains had become regular, the surges of slow rollers coming in from the sea a mile apart from far, far away. This would be his second child. The last time he had waited on a straw tick in a displaced persons camp in Germany. The child, Karl Knechtmann, named after Heinz's father, had died. And with it, once more, had died the name of one of the finest cellists ever to have lived. When the numbness of weary wishing lifted momentarily during this thin second vigil, Heinz's mind was a medley of proud family names, gone, all gone, that could be brought to life again in this new being if it lived. Peter Knechtmann, the surgeon, Kroll Knechtmann, the botanist, Friedrich Knechtmann, the playwright, dimly recalled uncles, or if it was a girl, and if it lived, it would be Helga Knechtmann, Heinz's mother, and she would learn to play the harp as Heinz's mother had, And for all Heinz's ugliness, she would be beautiful. The Knechtmann men were all ugly. The Knechtmann women were all lovely as angels, though not all angels. It had always been so, for hundreds and hundreds of years. Mr. Netman, said the nurse, it's a boy and your wife is fine. She's resting now. You can see her in the morning. You can see the baby in 20 minutes. Heinz looked up dumbly. It weighs 5 pounds 9 ounces. She was gone again, with the same prim smile and officious squeaking footsteps. Knechtmann, murmured Heinz, standing and bowing slightly to the wall. The name is Knechtmann. He bowed again and gave a smile that was courtly and triumphant. He spoke the name with an exaggerated old-world pronunciation like a foppish footman announcing the arrival of nobility, a guttural drum roll unsoftened for American ears. Knechtmann. Mr. Netman, a very young doctor with a pink face and close-cropped red hair, stood in the waiting room door. There were circles under his eyes, and he spoke through a yawn. Dr. Powers, cried Heinz, clasping the man's right hand between both of his. Thank God, thank God, thank God, and thank you. Said Dr. Powers, and he managed to smile wanly. There isn't anything wrong, is there? Wrong? Said Powers. No. Everything's fine. If I look down in the mouth, it's because I've been up for 36 hours straight. He closed his eyes and leaned against the door frame. No trouble with your wife, he said in a faraway voice. She's made for having babies, regular pop-up toaster, like rolling off a log, snip-snap. She is? Asked Heinz incredulously. Dr. Powers shook his head, bringing himself back to consciousness. My mind conked out completely. Sousa, I got your wife confused with Mrs. Sousa. They finished in a dead heat. Netman. You're Netman. Sorry, your wife's the one with pelvis trouble. Malnutrition as a child, said Heinz. Yeah, well, the baby came normally, but if you're going to have another one, it better be cesarean just to be on the safe side. I can't thank you enough, said Heinz passionately. Dr. Powers licked his lips and fought to keep his eyes open. It's okay, he said thickly. Night. Lock. He shambled out into the corridor. The nurse stuck her head into the waiting room. You can see your baby, Mr. Netman. Doctor, said Heinz, hurrying out into the corridor, wanting to shake Powers' hands once again so that Powers would know what a magnificent thing he'd done. It's the most wonderful thing that's ever happened. The elevator doors slithered shut between them before Dr. Powers could show a glimmer of response. This way, said the nurse. Turn left at the end of the corridor and you'll find the nursery window there. Write your name on a piece of paper and hold it against the glass. Heinz made the trip by himself, without seeing another human being until he reached the end. There, on the other side of a large glass panel, he saw 100 of them cupped in shallow canvas buckets and arranged in a square block of straight ranks and files. Heinz wrote his name on the back of a laundry slip and pressed it to the window. A fat and placid nurse looked at the paper, not at Heinz's face, and missed seeing his wide smile. Missed an urgent invitation to share for a moment in his ecstasy. She grasped one of the buckets and wheeled it before the window. She turned away again, once more missing the smile. Hello, little Knechtmann, said Heinz to the red prune on the other side of the glass. His voice echoed down the hard, bare corridor and came back to him with embarrassing loudness. He blushed and lowered his voice. Little Peter, little Cole, he said softly, little Friedrich. And there's Helga in you too, little spark of Knechtmann, you little treasure house. Everything is saved in you. I'm afraid you'll have to be more quiet, said a nurse, sticking her head out from one of the rooms. Sorry, said Heinz. I'm very sorry. He fell silent. and contented himself with tapping lightly on the window with a fingernail, trying to get the child to look at him. Young Knechtmann would not look, wouldn't share the moment, and after a few moments the nurse took him away again. Heinz beamed as he rode on the elevator, as he crossed the hospital lobby, but no one gave him more than a cursory glance. He passed a row of telephone booths, and there, in one of the booths with the door open, he saw a soldier with whom he'd shared the waiting room an hour before. "Yeah, Ma, 7 pounds, 6 ounces. Got hair like Buffalo Bill. No, we haven't had time to make up a name for her yet. That you, Pa?" "Yep, mother and daughter doing fine, just fine. 7 pounds, 6 ounces. Nope, no name." "That you, sis? Pretty late for you to be up, ain't it? Doesn't look like anybody yet. Let me talk to Ma again." "That you, Ma? Well, I guess that's all the news from Chicago. Now, Mom, take it easy. Don't worry. It's a swell-looking baby, Mom. Just the hair looks like Buffalo Bill. And I said it as a joke, Mom. That's right. 7 pounds, 6 ounces." There were 5 other booths, all empty, all open for calls to any place on earth. Heinz longed to hurry into one of them breathlessly and tell the marvelous news, but there was no one to call, no one waiting for the news. But Heinz still beamed, and he strode across the street and into a quiet tavern there. In the dank twilight, there were only 2 men, tete-a-tete, the bartender and Mr. Sousa. "Yes, sir, what'll it be?" "I'd like to buy you and Mr. Sousa a drink," said Heinz, with a heartiness strange to him. "I'd like the best brandy you've got. My wife just had a baby." "That's so," said the bartender with polite interest. 5 pounds, 9 ounces, said Heinz. "Huh," said the bartender. "What do you know?" "Netman," said Sousa. "What you get?" "Boy," said Heinz proudly. "Never knew it to fail," said Sousa bitterly. "It's the little guys. All the time the little guys." "Boy, girl," said Heinz, "it's all the same, just as long as it lives. Over there in the hospital, they're too close to it to see the wonder of it. A miracle, over and over again, the world made new." "Well, wait till you've racked up 7, Netman," said Sousa. "Then you come back and tell me about the miracle." "You got 7, said the bartender. "I'm one up on you. I got 8. He poured 3 drinks. "Far as I'm concerned," said Sousa, "you can have the championship." Heinz lifted his glass. "Here's to long life and great skill and much happiness to Peter Karl Knechtmann." He breathed quickly, excited by the decision. "There's a handle to take a hold of," said Sousa. "You'd think the kid weighed 200 pounds. "Peter is the name of a famous surgeon," said Heinz. "The boy's great uncle, dead now. Karl was my father's name." "Here's to Pete K. Netman," said Sousa with a cursory salute. "Pete," said the bartender, drinking. "And here's to your little girl, the new one," said Heinz. Sousa sighed and smiled wearily. "Here's to her, God bless her." "And now, I'll propose a toast," said the bartender, hammering on the bar with his fist. "On your feet, gentlemen. Up, up, everybody up." Heinz stood and held his glass high, ready for the next step in camaraderie, a toast to the whole human race, of which the Knechtmanns were still a part. "Here's to the White Sox," roared the bartender. "Mendoza, Fox, Melee," roared Sousa. "Fane, Lawler, Rivera," said the bartender. He turned to Heinz. "Drink up, boy. The White Sox. Don't tell me you're a Cub fan." "No," said Heinz, disappointed. "No, I don't follow baseball, I'm afraid." The other 2 men seemed to be sinking away from him. "I haven't been able to think about much but the baby." Oops. The bartender at once turned his full attention to Sousa. "Look," he said intensely. They take Thane off first and put him at third and give Pierce first, then move Minoso in from left field to shortstop. See what I'm doing? Yep, said Sousa eagerly. And then we take the no-good Carrascal and... Heinz was all alone again, with 20 feet of bar between him and the other two men. It might as well have been a continent. He finished his drink without pleasure and left quietly. At the railroad station, where he waited for a local train to take him home to the south side, Heinz's glow returned again as he saw a co-worker at the dry cleaning plant walk in with a girl. They were laughing and had their arms around each other's waist. "Harry," said Heinz, hurrying towards them. "Guess what, Harry? Guess what happened?" He grinned broadly. Harry, a tall, dapper, snub-nosed young man, looked down at Heinz with mild surprise. "Oh, hello, Heinz. What's up, boy?" The girl looked perplexed, and as though asking why they should be accosted at such an odd hour by such an odd person. Heinz avoided her slightly derisive eyes. "A baby, Harry. My wife just had a boy." "Oh," said Harry. He extended his hand. "Well, congratulations." The hand was limp. "I think that's swell, Heinz. Perfectly swell." He withdrew his hand and waited for Heinz to say something else. Yes, about an hour ago," said Heinz. 5 pounds, 9 ounces. I've never been happier in my life." "Well, I think it's perfectly swell, Heinz. You should be happy." "Yes, indeed," said the girl. There was a long silence, with all three shifting from one foot to the other. "Really good news," said Harry at last. "Yes, well," said Heinz quickly. "Well, that's all I had to tell you." "Thanks," said Harry. "Glad to hear about it." There was another uneasy silence. "See you at work," said Heinz, and strode jauntily back to his bench, but with his reddened neck betraying how foolish he felt. The girl giggled. Back home in his small apartment, at 2 a.m, Heinz talked to himself, to the empty bassinet, into the bed. He talked in German, a language he had sworn never to use again. "They don't care," said Heinz. "They're all too busy to notice life, to feel anything about it. A baby is born." He shrugged. What could be duller? Who would be so stupid as to talk about it, to think there was anything important or interesting about it? He opened a window on the summer night and looked out at the moonlit canyon of gray wooden porches and garbage cans. "There are too many of us, and we are all too far apart," said Heinz. "Another Connecticut is born, another O'Leary, another Sousa. Who cares? Why should anyone care? What difference does it make? None." He lay down in his clothes on the unmade bed and with a rattling sigh went to sleep. He awoke at 6. As always, he drank a cup of coffee, and with a wry sense of anonymity, he jostled and was jostled aboard the downtown train. His face showed no emotion. It was like all the other faces, seemingly incapable of surprise or wonder or joy or anger. He walked across town to the hospital with the same detachment, a gray, uninteresting man, a part of the city. In the hospital, he was as purposeful and calm as the doctors and nurses bustling about him. When he was led into the ward where Avshin slept behind the white screens, he felt only what he had always felt in her presence: love and aching awe and gratitude for her. "You'll go ahead and wake her gently, Mr. Netman," said the nurse. "Avshin." He touched her on her white gowned shoulder. "Avshin. Are you all right, Avshin?" Murmured Avshin, her eyes open to narrow slits. "Heinz. Hello, Heinz. Sweetheart, are you all right?" Yes, she whispered. "I'm fine. How's the baby, Heinz?" Perfect, Avshin. "They couldn't kill us, could they, Heinz?" "No. And here we are, alive as we can be." "Yes. The baby, Heinz." She opened her dark eyes wide. "It's the most wonderful thing that ever happened, isn't it?" Yes, said Heinz.
Brava. So simple and so sad. And
It's so wonderful. Well, that shows you a little of the breadth of Kurt Vonnegut, a wonderful author. And thanks to the library and to Thunder River, next month on the third Sunday at 1 o'clock, we'll be looking forward to the powerful and wonderful words of a young author named Nathan Englander.
oh,
If you don't know about him,
I don't. So I'll
you
do
will.
some research in the next month. I look forward to seeing it.
The
Any
readers will be Lon Winston and Lee Sullivan.
awesome. Is there any hint of when we might be going back? I'm not encouraging this, but any hint of when we might actually go back to the library? And I'm also hoping maybe if we do go back to the library, that it can still maybe have a streaming component with it in the future.
It would be wonderful, and I hope so too. Everything's just a little bit up in the air yet for all of us, including the library. So,
right.
But I can't tell you how grateful I am for this opportunity and for you reading, Mikey.
My pleasure. Thank you. It's a privilege. I also want to give a shout out to the man behind the scenes, the wizard behind the curtain, Sean Jeffries.
Yes.
And also everybody else on the Thunder River staff, Corey, the executive director, Corey Simpson, Cameron Miranda, basically runs everything else, and Lauren, the development director. They're keeping Thunder River together in this time when we basically have no revenue coming in. The gala was a fairly successful fundraiser. It's not too late to go to our website and hit that donate button. And our next upcoming streamed event is the happy hour with the Thunder River Consensual Improv. That's Friday, May 22nd at 8 p.m.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we can all be grateful that we're going through this where we're going through it in the beautiful Roaring Fork Valley. So thanks so much.